Hey, folks, come on in. Come on in. I'm live today, Sunday, January 25th. I'm a little early today. So come on in, y'all. I'll give it a little bit of time. So usually I do my live tapings of the show every Sunday at 11 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. But this week I'm a little bit early. I've got to lead a board retreat online later today for an organization I'm working with. So decided to give myself a little bit of time in between the taping of the show and leading that retreat. All right. So come on in, y'all. Let's see if we get some folks joining us live this cold Sunday morning. Come on in, y'all. It is cold as shit. I don't know where y'all live. I'm in Chicago. The snow is coming. There ain't no sun. Well, there's a little bit of white, but the snow is coming. It is cold as shit. So might as well get your top coffee, get your weed, get whatever you need, and come on in and let's talk about what is going on this week in the stars. Because there's a lot of shit going on this week, y'all. And if you have been watching various social media platforms and the news, you also know that we are really ramping up in the U.S. this very loud governmental takeover, right, via ICE, via the police. So we're going to talk about that and a few other things this week. All right, so come on in. Let's get started. This week is a literal firestorm, right? As we have Neptune making her way into Aries, emerging from the deep waters alongside a large Aquarius stellium that is personal, as all the personal planets make contact with the lord of the underworld, Pluto, in the sign ruled by the Crone. So fire is here, and with it brings aggression, heat, and the spark of war. But it is also an energy of creating, as tensions rise to the surface to be faced individually and collectively. So it's time to sober up. Neptune is emerging from the deep waters, coming into the light, coming into the fire, literally emerging and sobering up. So it's time to create the reality we want to actually live in. So what is the world or worlds that we want to create? This is the weekly forecast for January 25th to the 31st. Neptune moves into Aries, what I'm calling a time to sober up and create reality. Welcome back to Yappin with the Stars, y'all, the show where I talk about what it means and takes for us to become human once again in a world that is trying to convince us that's all there is. And it's not. So let's talk about what the cosmos and see what actually is possible. I am your host and guide, Nicole Rouse, a storyteller who comes from a line of storytellers who weave and tell stories in many different ways. And as an anthropologist, astrologer, and artist, I work with astrology and ethnography to explore the stories of what it means for us to be human. Because right now, the present is up for grabs. So who is leading the stories that will bring us into our futures? Now, every Sunday, we check into the chaos we call society and ask two questions, y'all. What's the cosmos showing us this week? And what are we being called to move, create, burn, build, and or reflect upon? All right, like I said in the intro, y'all, there's a lot of shit going on, okay? And last week we really were talking about this a lot. Hey, Cece, how you doing? We were talking about this a lot because we were in that Capricorn stellium. Now, remember, Capricorn and Aquarius are ruled by Saturn. We are still being heavily influenced by the Great Mother, by the Crone. And again, if you followed me or engaged with my work for a while, you know that when I talk about the planet of Saturn, I do not see Saturn as Big Daddy in the sky, patriarch, trying to always being disciplinary on us. I actually argue that Saturn is the Crone. And I believe we are seeing more of that Cronus come out. And as Saturn emerges from the deep waters as well and joins Neptune in Aries next month, we're really going to see the ways that she has been cleansed of the patriarch and is asking us all to truly grow up by rethinking the structures and systems that we have been beholden to, asking the question, does the shit work and make sense? And if it doesn't, when do we take our authority back and start to create something else? This is an energy of creation, y'all. But do we know how to create? Because to create means you get curious, you ask questions, you want to innovate. But yet when we live in a society that has literally consistently groomed us into reproduction, groomed us into trying to be right, so getting the right answer, versus allowing ourselves to experience life. So we'll have quote unquote failures and also successes, but in that we learn, right, what it means to pave in and make our own way. We have been taught not to do that, to fear that, to actually think any kind of change is the problem. Even as we are fed this idea of change via innovation, that is nothing more than the kind of dystopian imaginations of oligarchs and technocrats, right? As I've said over and over again, that we are now seeing right now truly doesn't make any sense. But yet we still buy into these constructions and conscriptions of other people. So what does it mean for us to start to believe ourselves? This is what Neptune and Aries is going to start to ask us, right? We had a preview of this last year. Actually, when I started this show in April, Neptune had just moved into Aries, funny enough, for the first time. And it was there for a little bit before it dipped itself back into Pisces, asking us to reflect and review upon the last 14 years in which Pisces has been hanging out. I mean, Neptune's been hanging out in the deep water of Pisces, and it's been making everyone goddamn Delulu, right? And sometime we were told Delulu is a Salulu, but right now we're realizing Delulu didn't Salulu a goddamn thing, right? So we are having to sober up, to grow up, to ask ourselves where our faith lies, who our faith lies in, and what are the stories that we have been constructed and have relied upon to align with and validate that kind of faith we're giving or not. All right. This is just the beginning. Neptune is just entering Aries tomorrow. But before Neptune even gets there, she's at a critical degree, 29 degrees, and she's been at 29 degrees for a while. 29 degrees is the last degree. It's the anarchic degree. It's a degree that asks us to become critical, right? To review and reflect and ask ourselves, does the ways in which this planet in this sign, the lessons we have learned in its time, what have we been able to engage with, embody, and examine? And when it comes to Neptune, remember, Neptune is the planet of the deep, again, not only the deep waters, but Neptune is the planet of the collective memory, right? It's the mysteries we cannot know. It's our culture. It is the things that create culture. So it's also glamour. It's storytelling and story making, right? It's spirituality. It's our faith systems. It's how we come together, right? Collectively. And many times the floor may not be solid. So it's how the collective moves together, right? What binds the collective together. And many times it's the storytelling. So, do we know how to tell stories? Do we know how to tell different stories, new stories? And where are we starting from? All right. And so it's really interesting, this idea of storytelling. And it's going to be big, y'all. I know it might sound as if we are going through this kind of massive authoritarian and out loud takeover in the US, right? It's always been here. But right now, the state is making it very apparent that it's not just going to the margins, it's going for everyone. It's scared, right? It's at its critical degree. The stories that have it's used to construct to get us to buy into it are crumbling at its feet, right? And we can talk about the margins already knowing this. We can talk about the ways in which what the state is doing to everyone, right? Right now is the same thing the state has been doing to various populations in this thing we call the United States since its inception. So we have chickens coming home to roost. The stories that many have bought into to turn a blind eye to the violence of the state, to those who sit at the sidelines, right? The minorities, the marginalized. We're talking about Black folks, Native folks, queer folks, disabled folks, folks who do not sit inside the conscription of the norm, right? Now that that norm is no longer safe, right? It was always an illusion and lie. Now we are faced with the reality of a kind of sobering up collectively as a nation. The story we have been told that this is what freedom and democracy is, we have to believe it now. This is freedom and democracy in the United States of America via the plantation system that comes out of the colonial project, y'all. This is freedom and democracy. And we're realizing that if this is freedom and democracy, we might need to start doing different definitions. We might need to have different systems, right? And structures and abilities for us to do the thing that we are realizing right now we need the most, and that is care. When we talk about pushing back against an authoritarian state, y'all, it is the stories that matter. We got to start at the foundations. We got to start with the imagination, because what are we fighting for? Are we fighting to maintain what already was? Well, what already was what got us here, right? Are we fighting just to survive? But then what is survival after that? Neptune is going to be asking us to take some responsibility back, right? Neptune is going to come to the head, ask us to come into our heads, very basically coming into the body. So what does it mean for us to sober up? What does it mean to have to face the reality, hit the body, and actually believe the shit? Well, in order for us to truly understand Neptune, y'all, and what Neptune is doing as it dries out in Aries, and then again, following suit will be Saturn, we got to go to where there's a concentration of planets right now and ask ourselves, then what is the cosmos kind of showing us as it, over the next few months, travels together all the personal planets? So right now we have got this stellium, which is more three or more planets in one sign in our house. Right now we're doing it by sign, Aquarius, right? We have 5 personal planets in the sign of Aquarius. So, no, 4, excuse me. So, what are they? We got Mercury, we have the sun, we got Mars, we got Venus. And then sitting alongside those 4 very personal planets is Pluto, Lord of the Underworld. So when we're thinking about what are we being asked to do, right, as Neptune moves into Aries and reclamation of the head, how do we do that? Well, we got to see where the personal planets are, our way of communication, Mercury, our sense of self and ego and drive, the sun, right, our passion and creativity, but also our strategy and our goddamn emotions and anger, Mars, and the ways we understand relationships and justice and therefore economic exchange, Venus. Well, it's in the sign of Aquarius right now. And what is Aquarius, y'all? Aquarius is where shit gets weird. Aquarius is where shit gets also real. There is a reality to Aquarius because it requires the collective, right? So when we think about Saturn, Saturn has 2 faces, just like all the planets do, except the sun and moon. The sun and moon are luminaries, so they kind of complement each other. But the rest of the planets, the personal planets, up until Saturn, have 2 aspects to them, 2 signs to them. And the signs are costumes, y'all. The signs are the ways in which they express themselves. Saturn expresses herself in Earth, Capricorn, and then in air, Aquarius. Earth, Capricorn, feminine, wet, right? Masculine, air, Aquarius, dry. Drying out. We're being asked to dry out via sobering up. There's a reality check here, a reality that is coming in that is requiring us to understand what we need collectively. And collectively, since the new moon started at 28 degrees in Virgo back in August, until we hit the new moon in Aries in April, every new moon has been inviting us to examine our relationship to care at 28 degrees, the Cancerian degree. And in that, we are having to face a harsh, but actually also, weirdly enough, beautiful reality. We need each other. We need each other. Not only is no one going to come save us, no one ever has. That was the fucking lie, y'all. Neptune drying out in Aries. What do we need to face collectively and sober and grow up with? We are seeing the impact and implications of a nation that refuses to acknowledge its historical past. And when it comes to the present, it will always knock at the door. The monster's knocking at the door. Do you let them in? Yes. That's the fucking hard answer we are having to realize right now. Yes. People let those motherfucking monsters in. Okay? This past week, I had my 4th of 5 Queering Chaos conversations in Chicago at Dorothy's. We were queering music and technology. I had 2 DJs and a storyteller on the panel with me. And about a quarter way through, I realized that the panel really needed to bring the audience in. If we were talking about music and technology, and the technology we're talking about was ancestral technology, it was the body's technology, and how we got to turn that technology on. And the only way we can do that is via music, because music becomes a location and modality that allows us to kind of activate, right? I did a group meditation with the audience because we were talking about fear. Right now, in this moment, I asked people what they were feeling, and people said fear, which makes sense. Of course, you would feel fear in this moment. You are seeing nonstop what the state will actually do once it removes its mask, right? Once it unmasks and it shows its own ass, the course fear is going to be there, right? Whether you believe that state or not, fear is here. So what are you going to do with it? So I asked folks to close their eyes and to invite that fear to the table. Invite that fear to the table. And I asked them, what does the fear say to them? If fear is sitting next to you and it is not overwhelming you, and y'all are having a drink together, whether it be alcoholic or not, I don't give a damn what it is, or a smoke, if y'all were conversing, what would fear say to you? And in that fear, right, I said, where are you feeling? What does it feel like? And then give it either a song or a movie. Memory, so you can memorize it, so you can attach something to it. Okay, this is how we study the self, y'all. And then I asked folks, okay, so then so then what happened? What came up? So I said, what was the first, what came up? And then what was the song or movie? And so again, fear was there. And then one of the panelists said, well, remind me of Sinners. There we go. Sinners becomes the location and the context. And from there, I brought the scene in. And I've used this scene a lot if you've listened to me. When Remick knocks on that couple's door and he is burning in that sun. Don't make no goddamn sense. Knock at the door. But then he opens it up and he's like, can I come on in? I got natives who are chasing me out here. And the white couple looks at him because he is burning. His skin is burning in the sun. And they said, really? And then he looks and then he sees it. He sees the tell. He sees the end. The white costume, the white robe with the mask. Right? The hooded veil. The Ku Klux Klan is in the building. And he knew exactly how he could get them with the story. Oh, yes, it's these savage natives out here coming to get me. You know how they are. I know you ain't heard about none, but they're coming to get us all. Because Remick knew that the story that those folks have sold their souls to was more important to them than their own goddamn lived reality. Would you let the monsters in? So we use that as the example. Monsters knocking at the door. So what does your fear tell you to do? The next person who I asked, okay, so then what does your fear say? That person said, run. Of course it says run. That makes a lot of goddamn sense. Instead of opening the door and letting the motherfucker in, you might want to go run somewhere. But where are you running to? Right? Well, who can I run to? Where can I run to share this empty space? Right? So I asked somebody else. So then where do we run to? What does fear say to you? And then the next person said, well, my fear said that it's also uncomfortable too. I'm uncomfortable and it's uncomfortable. That makes sense. Monsters knocking at the door. Fear is here. It says to run. But where are you running to? Well, we don't know. We're both uncomfortable. So then where does the uncomfortability go? Where do you run to? The next person said, well, what I saw was home. So we're running home. But where is home? What is home? How do we think about home? And the next person said, well, what I saw was myself. And I saw a reclamation of the self. And I said, here we go. Collective dreaming in action. Fear is knocking at the door. We are all seeing it. We can all feel it. We can all smell it in the space. Let's call it. Let's claim it. Let's sit in that reality. So then how do we attach it to something? The first thing that came up was a movie, Sinners. Makes sense. That is a prime example of what happens when you allow the story to overtake you. So therefore, you do not listen to your fear. You will let that motherfucker in. When it tells you to run because you're both uncomfortable, because what you're trying to figure out where home is, and home is you. Reclamation. That's the power of the story, y'all. And we did that, if folks were there, we did that within, say, 20 minutes, of the overall kind of conversation, or 30 minutes of the overall conversation. It was an exercise of embodiment. We are being asked right now to embody our reality, right? Because we are being asked to dream. The last conversation I'm going to be having is February 17th, actually. If you're going to be in Chicago, it's the 5 of 5, the crescendo of this panel series that's part of my larger Queering Chaos project. And there I'm talking about queering dreams and dreaming. And it's a little uncomfortable, but I'm the panelist this time. And I'll be talking with and kind of being asked questions by 2 Black queer folks who are my friends, who are my family, and folks who I dream with regularly and bring those dreams into reality. First is my creative partner, Forrest Brooks, and the other person is my good friend and sister, Dr. Moya Bailey. And what we're going to do is Forrest is going to set up his DJ equipment, because Forrest and I dream through music. So we're going to show how we do it. Music's going, he's usually spinning something, I start conversing, and next thing you know, a whole new world is created. That's literally how the Queering Chaos project came up, is me talking with him and Moya and other folks last year. And from that irritation, from that fire, once I allowed myself to incubate, is when that concept came through, right? As a way to do something. And then Moya and I work and dream through talking, but also through throwing cards. We will always have some cards around, throwing cards and working with spirit. So we're going to show that. I'm going to show that and bring the audience in because we have to learn how to dream again. It's a praxis. It's something that we have to kind of learn and bring up, y'all, because this is what we're being asked to do. The state needs us to buy into the fact that this is the only logical next step in this evolution of the nation state. That the only logical next step is to give up, throw your hands up, become docile, let those motherfuckers come in, knock at your door, and bust it open. They're not even knocking at this point. They're busting that door down. But you know how they bust that door down, y'all? And this is the harsh reality we have to come into. And this is what Aquarius is asking us to do right now. We are collectively having to go through a death and rebirth and face the fact that the reason why this violence has been knocking at the door right now and has busted itself on in is because the collective has allowed it. That is one of the harsh realities we have to face with right now. The collective has allowed this violence to not only stop at the knocking, but to bust that door down. Because ICE is not the Gestapo. ICE is not some articulation of Nazi Germany, okay? ICE is as American as American pie. It's the fucking cops. It's the slave patrollers. It's the ones who were constructed to ensure that this nation could be democratic and free off the backs of other people that were dehumanized. And because the majority, those who felt as if they were safe in some way, shape, or form because of proximity to that core, to that so-called privilege that is nothing more than a mediocre ass storyline that you have to conform to in order to be seen by it, okay? The roads have been open for centuries for this shit to come in. That's the harshest we have to realize right now. When we could justify the state via the police, knocking down doors and killing 7-year-olds in their houses. When we can justify police killing 10-year-olds because they had a toy gun. When we can justify police killing other citizens who have permits to carry, but because the color of their skin made it very clear that they did not truly have that right in practice, right? When that was always justified with well, we don't know the full story. Well, when the wells come in, the wells open the door. And now they have free reign because no one said no more. Those who so-called had this privilege, the so-called privilege, everyone wants to fucking invoke, right? Where did that privilege get you? Because right now they killing anybody who wants to dare to tell them to back down. Because they're also fucking cowards and they're scared. So what is Aquarius doing right now? What is Saturn actually doing right now that is helping us as the mother? Saturn as the mother, Saturn as the crone, Saturn as the planet that is saying, y'all, you do not want somebody else owning your own head. You want to claim your own authority. You want to be able to set the traditions and the structures and the systems that allow those traditions to be maintained over space and time. And you want to be flexible enough to understand that those structures may need to change. You cannot make it stagnant because Saturn said, I may rule time and boundaries, but do you see the composition of my planet? I am gas. I flow, baby. My rings themselves can flow in and out. If I am the planet that is boundaries and structures and systems, Capricorn is the bones, y'all. Capricorn is our skeletal system. It is what makes your back stand up. It is what brings your teeth, your structures of you. Therefore, if Capricorn is our structure and we understand structures and systems of governance, right? Well, shit, our structure, our own bone structure shifts through time. Our body changes through time, every 7 years, which is a Saturn cycle. Saturn squares every 7 years, asking us to look at the tensions in our lives. Then it opposes, asking us to reflect. Then it returns, saying, okay, now here's stage 1 or 2 of growing up. What did you learn this time? And what does it mean for you now to construct the structures of your life? To create them with others, because we have to, because Saturn says, baby, you might want to do it by yourself, but you can't do it whether you like it or not. The human baby needs care. The human baby needs other bodies in order to grow. So Aquarius, the collective aspect of Saturn, right? The side of Saturn that's also innovative, but innovation only when the collective owns the structures of society, owns the foundations, takes responsibility for constructing those structures. Where have we given up our authority thinking that somebody else is going to do it for us? That's what Aquarius right now is saying. Power to the people, but the people understand their power. So we're seeing what's happening in Minneapolis right now. We're seeing what the collective action looks like when people actually do patrol their own neighborhoods. When people patrol their own neighborhoods, not police and surveillance them, that is collective care. And this is not to romanticize what's going on up there whatsoever. Not at all. This is what happens when people have to be in reaction mode, make shit pop on the spot. This is the energy we're entering into now, y'all. We have been in earth and water for the past 8 to 10 years with those outer planets, and actually even longer, because even when Uranus was in a fire sign before it moved over into Earth, it was still in meeting the water and air, the water and earth, Pluto and Neptune. Now the outer planets are moving us into elements that require action, that require reaction, that require us to be able to be able to do something. Fire and air here. But do we know how to be grounded in that action? So Minneapolis is giving us a template. When the state comes knocking, you believe that motherfucker and you knock back. Right? You knock back. You knock back through protection, care. New moons, 28 degrees. We have been asked to understand the relationship to care that we have and need. And where does that come through, y'all? So Aquarius right now is saying that a lot of stuff is going through a death and rebirth cycle because Pluto is here. Pluto's Lord of the Underworld. And right now we're having the personal planets meet Pluto in the sign of the collective. Okay, so there is this kind of realization that power is here. Pluto is not just the underworld and death and rebirth. It is power itself. It is will. It is the banks. So it is the kind of economic systems that maintain the power base of a society. It's the institutions. And this is why, being the Lord of the Underworld, there's a logic here, right? Because usually minerals that are worth something are buried in the ground. And so those minerals, think of like, gold and silver and the like, and other things that we have a value. That's where you're thinking institutions and banks and things like that. So that's how you can make that association with Pluto, okay? So I mentioned this last week. I wouldn't be surprised, especially this week. There's a lot of volatile energy coming up, especially when Pluto and Mars meet. And is that later? I'm looking at my notes, y'all. Pluto and Mars are going to meet later this week, or is that next week? Yes, Pluto and Mars meet on Tuesday. But before we get here, today we have Mars. Mars went into Aquarius yesterday. So we have Mars at 1 degree today, Pluto's at 3 degrees, Sun's at 5 degrees, Mercury's at 8 degrees, and Venus is at 10 degrees. Now, why do the degrees matter? I'm saying the degrees, y'all, because the closer the degrees are to each other, that is called a conjunction. And if they're the same degree, that is a exact conjunction, which means those planets' energies are melding together. Okay. So when you're looking at your astrology chart, those numbers that you see, if you're doing the little circle, the little circle chart, they really do matter because it helps us understand in your natal chart how the conversations, what we call aspects between the planets, what are happening. But then if we want a transit chart, which is just your natal chart or a natal chart with the planets that are happening right now, so it's kind of two charts talking to each other, then again, those degrees will help us understand if the current transits are personally impacting you, as the current transits also tell us what's going on collectively. I hope that makes sense, y'all. Okay. So right now we've got those planets, like I said, in Aquarius. At the same time, we've got Neptune at 29 degrees today and Saturn's at 28 degrees. Now, why is Saturn matter? Because Saturn rules Aquarius. So when you're looking at a transit chart or any chart, you want to see where the ruler of that house is. So the ruler of Aquarius that has all those personal planets is over in Pisces, 28 degrees. Cancer degree, Cancerian degree. Family, home, nurturing, memory, lineage. It's the waters. Water carries memory, right? Aquarius, what is the memories that we need to remember collectively right now? We have got to remember this moment, right? In all of its articulations. We have to remember that this is exactly what the state will do because it is what has been allowed collectively. So if the collective realizes, well, shit, I think we probably fucked up because we did, right? Collectively, right? And when I say we, I mean the majority. I mean those who bought into this idea that this was a democracy, that this was freedom, that this was somehow the best nation in the world, right? You've been propagandized to when you bought into it. Just understand that that is how good these states are doing. And we're not the only ones that are good at putting propaganda onto its citizens. It's how nation states are built and imagine communities are constructed and maintained so that you continue to buy into the state. The state needs your consent, y'all. You can only coerce a population for so long. There's a finite resource to that, right? You have to get people to consent. And how do you do that? Well, you make them sick and ignorant. And I mean that. You make them sick and ignorant. You attack the institutions that then form the foundations of those citizens that will then come into the workforce. So we're talking about 28 degrees of Cancer, the Cancerian degree that the new moons are asking us to reflect upon, right? And we got Saturn right now, the great Crone mother at the Cancerian degree with all the personal planets in the collective sign, right? The fixed collective sign of the humanitarian, of the revolutionary, of the one who revolts. Well, then do we know what it means to be human? Do we understand what we need collectively via understanding what we need individually? So therefore, do we know what the body is requiring of us right now? And it is that care. And care, y'all, care is love. And love is fire. Neptune goes into Aries tomorrow. So that's today. That's all the planets today. Neptune critical degree. We're at the end of it. What have we learned the last 14 years with Neptune in Pisces? What have we learned the last 14 years with Neptune in Pisces when it comes to concepts of faith, concepts of the collective in faith, who we have put as faith leaders, right? The ways which we have disassociated. So all of the kind of escapism mechanisms that we've done, whether it be drugs, drink, sex, work, whatever it is, y'all. There's a critical degree of us having to realize and face the reality that we bought into structures and systems that had no legs. The emperor had no clothes. So then where do we find our own clothing now? How do we stop being so naked and naive and start to actually clothe ourselves, feed ourselves, care for ourselves? Well, Neptune moving into Aries tomorrow is going to help us figure that out through the dreaming. Dreaming into action. We were sitting in the ephemeral, we were sitting in the waters, right? But as Neptune's come up to dry, come up to shore, got to get those sea legs out, right? She's got to shake that shit out. Neptune being the higher octave of Venus. As she shakes it out, well, now it's time to go to work. But go to work doing what? Creating. Time to create. And this is important, y'all, because if you think about it, it is in the cultural spaces that these wars are first waged. And we're seeing this right now. We are literally seeing this right now today. How many of y'all on TikTok are trying to open up your app the last day or two? Right, and you popped up that kind of new terms and conditions, right, that you have to agree to. Now, those terms and conditions are actually very similar to other social media platforms, but they are very starkly different from the ways in which TikTok was operating before. So naturally and rightfully so, folks are concerned. Different servers, different hosts, different purpose of the app. And when I was able to bypass accepting those terms just to kind of get a feel of what the algorithm is, right now it's shit, right? I'm seeing nothing but quite frankly, white conservative creators that I've never seen before. My own profile was kind of glitching, and I have no interest necessarily in trying to figure out how to navigate that new algorithm that is truly meant to kind of keep us in these very kind of narrowed understandings of what's going on in the world. Right. This again is what happens when you give a raggedy ass state power and control over something. It shows you just how raggedy it is. Right? The algorithm right now ain't shit, just like the state is. So do we believe that? Well, I do. So what does it mean for us to create in other different places, in different spaces? And so I've been thinking a lot about that. I don't think I'm going to continue on TikTok. It was a space that I initially started with creating in the public, coming out of higher ed and figuring out what I was going to do in terms of working for myself and also creating a new kind of name for myself, right, in my work outside of the higher ed space. And so when I was coming online about what 3, 4 years ago now, TikTok was one of the first spaces I did that actually created videos. I was on Facebook for personal reasons. We were a lot of us were on Facebook because I was in grad school when when that first came out, shit, 20 plus years ago. But I had removed myself from there because Facebook is it's an interesting wasteland. It's an interesting wasteland of a lot of text and a lot of like just fake AI shit, right? In IG, I hadn't really gotten the hang of because I wasn't necessarily trying to do pictures and stuff. So TikTok was the kind of opening for me. But things come to an end, right? And I think this is something that we are all having to kind of reckon with. What does it mean to let things run its course, let things die, so that we can figure out a new way to live? And the way that kind of TikTok has moved, right, as one social media platform that should just even a year ago was a space that people felt we really needed in order to get information, right, directly from the source and to be able to connect with others we never would have and form these kind of collectives. Even if we couldn't meet, we could do it technologically, right? Well, that's what happens when you build in somebody else's house. They'll take the shit. The house always wins, whether we like it or not, right? The house always wins because the house understands the rules because the house made the rules and the house will move the fucking rules as to its will. And then gaslight us and telling us that it's always been that way, right? We just got to keep up. So now it's a time for an ending. Aquarius ruling technology, right? Ruling the technologies, but it's not just the technologies outside of us, y'all. So Aquarius is telling us if those technologies outside of us are dead. Pluto's in Aquarius, right? Mars is there, Sun, Mercury, Venus, personal planets. We are being asked to re-examine our relationship to technology, to the technologies that we place our faith in. And again, I'm saying faith because Saturn is in Pisces. Pisces being the sign, the articulation of Jupiter, the water version of Jupiter that Jupiter puts on when it wants to delve into the deep waters and get a little escapism, right? But really get into the depths of where faith resides, where our faith collectively resides, where the spirit lies. And so the spirit of the algorithm right now is lying with a white conservative Christian nation state. Do we believe? And if we do, then what other worlds are we creating? What other locations and spaces are we going to? What other technologies do we need to create or resurrect? And again, those just aren't outside of ourselves, y'all. The first technology is the body. I'm going to say this over and over again. And right now it is being activated. Saturn ruling the structures and systems of society. And we had just had all of these personal planets in Capricorn. Last week I asked, what do your bones tell you? What have your bones been telling you, y'all, especially since this new year? What do your bones scream out to you, right? What are they both whispering and loudly proclamating to you? Because the bones of us, our bones need to be activated because now fire is coming into the equation. Neptune is drying out. Fire is here. Pluto's got air. Air is already amongst us. And when Uranus moves its way into Gemini in April, we are entered fully into fire air. It is a time of activation. It's a time of doing, but it can easily be burnout. It can easily be burnout, y'all, if you don't realize there is a way you have to learn how to work with it, not have it overtake and consume you. So, how do we do that? Well, we have to think about the opposite sign, right? You got to think about the opposite sign. Aquarius opposes Leo. Leo is the heart. Leo is the child. Leo is the father. Leo is the patriarch. We have to re-examine our relationship to all those things. Pluto will be opposing that. So anything that goes through Leo, and later this year, we're going to have a lot of shit going through Leo. We are going through a death and rebirth. And I actually think this one is actually a good one because of this. The sun has to shine. The sun has to shine, y'all. That is the function of the sun, right? The function of the sun is to shine. So if that is what the sun needs to do, and Pluto is the lord of the underworld and the depths and the dark, and its job is to have us transform, or his job is to have us face that darkness in order to what? Find a light somewhere. As Pluto shines a light and opposes Leo, it's shining a light on the facades that need to crumble so that your light can shine. Drop the fucking performances, y'all. This is the cracking of identity. This is the cracking of identity. And Aaron, exactly, because this is how we relearn what technology means. We are cracking the ways in which we understand ourselves. Neptune is going into Aries. Aries is the body, is the head, is the sense of self. Neptune is stories. Neptune are the constructions that we have bought into. How are you, the understanding of you, going through a reboot, going through a reconstitution? Identity has been dying. I've been saying this for a few years now. And going off of the work of Stuart Hall and the idea of the cultural identity and markers and what identity really means, and do we really need identity in the way in which it's been constructed for us, right? And I do believe folks are going to double down, Shay. So let's talk about the doubling down that we're seeing right now as we are being asked to crack and break. When you are afraid of change, you will hold on to what you know, right? You will hold on for dear life to what you know. And we're actually seeing this. I'm glad you brought this up, Shay, because we're seeing this in the ways that people are trying to, are actually engaging in resistance in this moment. So I talked about Minneapolis and the different ways that people on the ground are organizing to patrol their neighborhoods, right? Because that is a different way to keep the fucking police out and ensuring that the police are just not going to come in and bulldoze, even as they are taking lives still, right? They're taking lives, but they're also having their lives being pushed back against. At the same time, we are seeing the reemergence of people cosplaying revolution once again. One example of this is the so-called new Black Panthers that have come out the woodwork, especially I believe in Minneapolis now too. Right? You've got these folks, and this happened again. This is not the first time. Back in what, 2020, during the BLM, there were actors. Y'all remember that? There were actors who were hired to put on Black Panther attire and go out there and perform being revolutionary, like with the guns and the dark black leather and the fist bump out there, right? And then they said that they were actors who were out there trying to, what did they say? Trying to give people hope or some shit. It made no goddamn sense, y'all. It made no goddamn sense. And they did it for a come up. Exactly. It was nothing more than a come up, right? And we're seeing this again. This is actually a good example of what is coming up to the surface that we're all having to look at and really ask ourselves, are we going to buy into this bullshit again? And why did we buy in this shit to begin with? Okay, because it makes no goddamn sense. Pluto's going to be opposing Leo. And again, as we have later on in this year, as we're going to get more more planets going through Leo, this is where we're going to have the death and rebirth of the costume that doesn't make any sense. Black pain for gain is always on repeat, and we have to remember that in the economic system of racial capitalism, Black death is always going to be something that will have a gain for it. Because the commodity on the racial capitalist market, y'all, internationally, is the Black body. That is literally the foundation of the racial capitalist system. It's the body itself, particularly the Black body, and however that Black body is defined, because it can shift and move, but it's commodified. It's rendered down into an essence, right, that can just be traded on the market. But is that actually working anymore? Because does that make any sense? No, it fucking doesn't when we take back the authority. So you got these folks cosplaying these Black revolutionaries, right? But it makes sense, y'all, right? It makes sense. And I've been talking about this shit for a while. Of course, you're going to use the dead like that. Of course, you're going to cosplay and pretend as if you're doing something revolutionary, even though you literally have no understanding and basis of that past that you are invoking in the present, because we are taught to consume everything, ourselves, one another, the dead, and everything else in between. Right? This is a byproduct of that fucking Neptune in Pisces for the last 14 years and the evocation of so-called spiritual leaders, priests and priestesses, shamans and the like, right? Everyone went on a goddamn ayahuasca trip and came back and all of a sudden had 18 names and they couldn't even pronounce the goddamn selves, but they want to claim authority over spirit and tell you to go into a 5D, ignore your surroundings and become enlightened and manifest your greatest rewards. Right? The way spirit was fed back to us the last decade and a half is really a great example of just how good the spirit of the white Christian patriarch is in infesting, and I really do mean infesting the margins, infesting spaces that initially were places of resistance, that they came in and reconstituted the understanding of it. Because we have been taught publicly, right, especially again the past 15 years, to treat spirit as a ATM, to treat the dead as something we can consume, that we can just invoke their name to say a quote, right? Again, lay no offerings down, not learn from them, not even elevate them, quite frankly, just use and consume them. And we call that revolutionary. We got folks online saying that they have every right to sit out because they get to use the work that their ancestors did, because that's why they did that work, for us to sit down and not do shit. Who the fuck told you that? And what goddamn sense does that make? Your great grandmama, great granddaddy, auntie, uncle did not sit here and have their head busted in, or sit there and have to navigate these fucked up systems for you to sit your raggedy ass at home online, put a fucking TV, or pop that phone on, say a couple of things, talk about how you would be the next Malcolm X, but you ain't never left your goddamn home. Because the next thing you'll say, well, you've got anxiety personality disorder, so you know this is what capacity you have, but everybody else should do something. We have been taught passive resistance as revolutionary, right? So if we think about that, y'all, if we understand the exchange systems have been won in all levels that have groomed and trained us to exploit, to consume, right? To not reciprocate, to not understand exchange, then it makes a lot of sense why this spirit of this white Christian patriarch has infiltrated all aspects of society. And we do it without even realizing it, right? It's abusing spirit and spirituality, Shane. It's this whole pull yourself up by the bootstrap. That is exactly what the 2010 spirituality was. Whiteness found a new cloak and she ran with that bitch. And folks ate it up. And now we're wondering why it took so long, quite frankly, even at the margins, for the younger generation to understand that you cannot just know something and the knowing is doing. You cannot just half-ass read somebody's article or book and quote it and take that as Bible. People have replaced God with theory, but both of them have been deified, which has left people docile. Because when you give authority outside yourself, when you see God outside of you, y'all, when you do not understand your body as a technology that requires sustenance, therefore it is connected in a relationship with other forms of life. Therefore, if these forms of life are embodiments of God, they're making you an embodiment of God. When you deny your own divinity and give it up to somebody else's, you are giving up your authority, and you are saying that you are a willing offering. You are sacrificing yourself. And we were told that logic and framing, y'all, was what was told was revolutionary. So do we understand and see how we're having such kind of chaotic energies right now, chaotic responses, people, having these emotions and feelings? Yes, because you're finally fucking feeling. Aquarius is air. It is fixed. You better be feeling some shit right now. Right? Yes, regardless of the color, right? Identity is breaking down. Neptune and Aries drying out is going to show us just how much identity was weaponized and utilized for the maintenance of the current power structure. And by those who believe that leading meant you had to replicate in one shape or form that power structure. But what happened in the 2010s, not only did spirituality rise, so did social justice, and the ways in which people were able to weaponize social justice language to become better abusers. And I mean that shit. So we were all living in these delusions. We were all living in these stories and scripts that told us to not believe ourselves in favor of the ideology, the cosmology, the idea of somebody else. And then what has happened in the whole so-called rise of all of these kind of newfangled ways of being and enlightenment and manifestation? We have seen a complete opening up of fucking abuse, couched, couched as justice, couched as freedom, couched as democracy. And of course it is, y'all. Of course it is. Because we were told this is freedom. We were told this is peace. Every time a peacekeeping mission goes into a country, it comes out and that population is riddled with STDs and unwanted pregnancies. That is what peace is. That is what peace is. Peace is STDs, violence, loss of land, and unwanted pregnancies. So this is why we're saying this is why I say right now, this is not a time of peace, it's a time of creation. You do not meet a violent state with peace. You do not. Who the fuck told us that? And what sense does that make? You meet a violent state with creativity, because this violent state only knows destruction. Right? Because as soon as those peacekeeping missions are gone, exactly what Shay's saying in the comments, and the missionaries come in. We got to give you a new God to pray to. We got to tell you to, baby, don't be in your body. Don't feel right now. Give it up. Pray it up. Your salvation and glory lie when that body is gone and you can go to the other side. What sense does that make? What kind of God makes a whole ass creation, makes these things called humans to be in this creation, and then when you get down here tells you, guess what, you ain't shit, ain't never gonna be shit, can't never be shit, because you came from folks who ain't shit, so you all got sin, so therefore the only thing you can do is keep giving up everything you got to this person, usually a man, right, in too tight of pants and some Louis Vuittons on a screen, right, on a stage, right, that somehow he gonna help you. You just got to keep giving and giving until you die, and then when you die, that martyrdom gives you a salvation. What kind of God is that? That sounds like somebody that don't know what the fuck he's doing. That is an MLM, right? That is an MLM, y'all. A hateful one. I know that's right, Shay. That is an MLM. And did the nation state, right? It is. Think about it, Desi, right? A whole ass pyramid scheme in a pimp, right? A pimp who wants us to be who wants us to be cheap assholes on the street, right? And then we're told that that's salvation. People love getting scammed. And I've always said this, and I agree completely, Desi. People always getting scammed. Right? Americans love a good scam. Americans love to be told a lie and then believe that bitch and then get upset when the lie was always said, baby, I've always been lying. Right? And then want to be like, well, I didn't know how. Of course, yes, you did. Right? But again, we're taught and groomed to give it up to somebody else. Neptune and Aries is saying what happens when the story now it becomes true. What happens when the story becomes true? We get nice knocking at the fucking door, knocking it down. Because the story that we allowed to maintain in the society was that it was okay. It was okay for violence to be enacted if it was enacted upon the heads of niggas. That's exactly what this country said. As long as you fucking up black folks and native folks and queer folks and poor folks, we don't give a shit. Right? We can justify that. But here it comes, knocking at the door. And now they killed the white man who was trying to help a white woman who was being pushed down. Or a woman, I'm not sure if she was white or not, being pushed down. Right? And now folks are saying, oh, they're killing white men. So now we really should be, upset. Baby, they don't like white men either. They don't like nobody. That's the lie. That's the gag. Right? That's the gag. White folks are the biggest ones that have gotten scammed. It really is, y'all. Whiteness really scam white folks the most. And now you're mad. I don't blame you for being mad now. You can be mad all you want, but here's what I'm going to say. Okay, here's what I'm going to say. I don't focus on, excuse me, white folks in my work for a number of reasons. Biggest one is I focus on the margins. I focus on queerness and queer folks, black folks, femmes, because when we center the margins, there's a way that we can create shit. right? And hopefully be left the fuck alone. But here's what I say. If you are now realizing and coming awakened, right? You now you believe. Now you believe. I'm not even gonna go into why it took you so long. I'm not gonna sit here and do the kind of, crip walk backwards, moonwalking backwards, and trying to make you feel bad. This is what I'm gonna say. Great. I'm glad you figured it out now. Can we please drop that whole kind of next step that usually happens where you gotta perform your wokeness? Well, you have to perform, letting everyone know that you have privilege and all this other. Skip all of that, get in your body, feel some shit, and have that feeling, have you go into some action. We can skip all that performative shit, y'all. Don't ask for no reading list. We already know motherfuckers can't read. All right? We already been through this. Don't ask for who, don't say trust Black women and then put a bunch of creators down there as a way of thinking that's doing something. Okay? Unless you put money in somebody's Cash App or somebody's bank account, keep it to yourself and move your ass into some kind of action. But that action has to be grounded. It is not reaction. It is action. Action grounded in a knowing that this is the reality we are in. Which means we have got to stop cosplaying what revolutionary action looks like. Excuse me, I got something in my throat. Let's go back to the Black Panthers. These Black Panthers. There's a way this idea of protesting and how we have been shown protesting really does need to shift. Because we're missing the point of how the protest was used back in the 1950s and 60s. Jesus, excuse me. King's strategy in the South, for better or for worse, was that they needed eyes. People didn't believe. Now, in the 1950s, Black folks, based off the work of Ida B. Wells in particular, and the NAACP, who were tracking lynchings in the U.S. in the early 1900s. Like Ida B. Wells, it needs even more goddamn respect put in her name for the absolute research and the diligence she did and the love and care she had for Black folks enough to go into and show the absolute violence and terror that we were facing as a people at that time. Because lynchings were insane. They were lynching folks all over the goddamn place, right? And this is the relationship with the land that whiteness has. It consumes, it takes, and it requires. It tames the land by forcing it to participate in brutal practices. The trees did not ask to be the location that held those ropes that then choked the life out of folks. They did not ask to do that, right? So there is a fucked up relationship that whiteness has with any form of life. So the NAACP, Ida B. Wells, record all of these and track them. That tracking leads to a delegation going to the UN in the 1950s and writing it out and going in to charge the US with genocide. You can read this online. We charge genocide. All right. There was a case. There was data. And the UN could see that the US had literally waged a terrorist war, a genocidal war on Black Americans, but the US said, no, we don't agree. And that shit got squashed. Then the 1960s happened. Now, this is the time in which the U.S. is also purporting itself to be the bastion of democracy and freedom globally. It is making a PR run. Okay, the U.S. is making a PR run coming out of World War I and II, being seen as the ones who came in and helped the Allies, win the war. All a story, y'all. All propaganda. So what do you do then? What do you do when you are not being believed and you are dying? Well, you need eyes. So then what is some of the strategies that come out of that time happen? Well, with King, he knew he needed the media. He knew he needed the media. So those marches, those protests, right? Those folks who were part of those protests, there was a lot of training because he was using the precipice of nonviolence. That was a strategy, y'all. That was a strategy at a time in which if any reaction was had, that was always used to justify violence by the state. What does that sound like? What does it sound like right now? Okay. So then he has the eyes. And it's not just black bodies that are being brutalized, right? Them white kids coming down from the north, right? Those freedom rides. That was also a strategy. So when that white man was busted, I talked about this before. He actually went to Beloit College. When I was a student, he talked about it. When that white man got his face busted, when he came out of that bus, because the local cops had tipped off local folks in that town that they were coming down to do some voter registration and education, right? The people on that bus strategized and said, let the white folks go first, because they also knew that there was going to be media there. And so what was snapped? That white man getting his face busted. And it wasn't to show it nationally, it was to show it internationally, y'all. It was an international shitstorm. The protests were used as a mechanism to get international attention in order to push something internally, to push back on the narrative that America was this bastion of fucking milk and honey, that you could come here and bootstrap your way up. Because the thing is, certain populations could come in here and bootstrap your way up, right? But on the backs of who and on based upon what? What did you have to give up once you entered and stepped upon this shore to take another identity that would allow you to do that? So you needed evidence, y'all. Now we're in 2026. I think the world knows we ain't shit. Pretty sure the world knows the U.S. ain't shit. We ain't free in no goddamn body, okay? So the strategy that we need then has to shift. But in order for us to do that, you got to be present. You got to be present in your body. You got to be present in this fucking moment to understand what this moment is actually requiring of us. Not genuflecting, crip walking, moonwalking back in time to a past that you don't even fully fucking understand, but you know can be commodified for you in the present. Therefore, you're convincing yourself you're doing something even though you truly have done nothing but put on a goddamn costume that you do not know how to actually enact. You can't even fill. You can't run the fucking bathwater of those folks. And if you did invoke their names, right, as the dead, they will look at you and say, who the fuck are you and why are you calling me down? You ain't done a goddamn thing. So then for folks saying, well, no, I get the chance to somehow rest, right, by not doing something. See, rest and not doing something are not the same thing. So Aaron, I completely agree with you. There is a bastardization of what rest is, right? In order to try to guilt certain populations to keep mammying for folks, and particularly Black queer folks, Black women, Black femmes. Rest and inaction are not the same goddamn thing. All right. All right. I'm gonna stop there, y'all, because I can keep going. And I gotta lead a whole ass board retreat in a couple of hours today online. So keep this in mind. All right. Your body, the technology, and it is action, but it is not reaction. So do you know how to work with it? We're going to be talking about this over the course of this year on the show. And in my Patreon, we will be examining this, right? We've been working with the stories. So we're going to be world building much more this year through storytelling by deconstructing and reconstituting archetypes. And I'm showing y'all how to do this, right? Thank you, Shay. I appreciate it. I'm showing y'all how to do this by me explaining over the past year why I consider Saturn the Crone. That is me reconstituting and remaking an archetype. And if we understand Saturn as the Crone and you looked at your chart as Saturn as the Crone, then what the hell would she tell you? How would you work with that planet much differently in that energy? Okay. So that's one example of it. We're gonna play this down the Patreon. So please join me there if you want to. If you want to kind of create and innovate in this way. All right. Also, this is why I've also shifted my astrology offering. So if you go on my website, y'all, I've got 4 new astrology offerings in my transit for returning clients. The 4 readings are 2026 astrological overview. I've got a working with Saturn. I've got a navigating astrological middle age, and then I got a what do I see reading. All of my readings, besides the transit ones, are at one price, and I've figured out this price is what works for me. Okay, and it works for me because it shows that when I do a reading with you, I do analyze your chart ahead of time. There's an assessment that I do. When we meet in person. I do all my readings live. They are recorded so that we are having a conversation. You can read a chart in many different ways. Again, I am not knocking anyone's reading style. I personally like to read talking to you and seeing you, and we work it through. And in those readings, we end up having prescriptions. So that is why I price my readings I do. And I'm only addressing this because if you've been with me, you've seen them kind of go up and down. This is one that I feel more comfortable with, and it gives me both what I need and also the exchange that you all need if you are trusting me to examine your chart. Okay, so if you're interested in having a reading with me, my readings are honestly more assessments with prescriptions because I want you to be able to know and work with your energy so that you can know and work with yourself. All right. So if you're interested in having a reading with me, if you're on my Patreon, there is a code for y'all for 20% off, and you can use that for any reading. It's not just one time. Okay. So if you're on the Patreon, I really do appreciate y'all's support. And I mean, from the bottom of my goddamn heart, because it's been the Patreon, especially last year, that was the only consistent money I had coming in when they cut all those contracts. And so this is what helped me actually eat when I literally had nothing but $100 to my name at one point. Okay. So the code is for patrons, and you can use that more as much as you want. If you're not interested in joining the Patreon, totally understand. I still have a 10% code for that folks can use. So if you use 2026, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that you love the readings. You can use code 2026 for 10% off any reading. Okay, and you can also use that more than once, just as a thank you for engaging with my work. So the readings are there, y'all. Again, if you are in Chicago in February, I'll talk more about that. The last Queering Chaos conversation will be February 17th, which is going to be the new moon Aquarius, the lunar new year for the Chinese, and a goddamn eclipse. We're going to be dreaming some shit. But before then, join me online this Wednesday. I will be doing my 2026 astrology lecture where I'm talking about fire and air. What I'll be doing there is through Big Liz Conjure. I'll have the sign up in the show notes. If you're in the soundscape level and higher on my Patreon, you'll have access to it, the live. And then if you're at the landscape, you'll have access to the recording. Okay, so don't purchase if you're at those levels. But if not, you can go ahead and purchase be a part of the live or the recording. What I'm going to do is go through the 7 major transits of 2026, but do it through the story of fire and air. So what is fire and air telling us as we navigate the beginning of a massive world change? Okay. All right, y'all. I think that is it. For anything else, go ahead and join the Patreon. I got a couple more things that we're going to be doing tomorrow for divination study session. For folks, we're going to be doing some recipes. I'm going to give you a scenario. And then I'm going to ask you to go into your kitchen, get 5 ingredients, and then you're going to make a recipe. I'm going to explain the logic. So what I'm doing in divination study, y'all, is the idea of the body as a technology and turning it on. We have to learn that. How the hell do you work with your body's technologies? That's what I'm doing divination. I use divination, which is basically pattern recognition, so that you understand patterns that spirit is telling you. How do you work with divination itself, right? Basically, how do you work with yourself? So we spent all last year breaking down astrology, and I broke down astrology through my lens. And then we moved into the kind of understandings of magical correspondences. So the laws, the kind of laws of nature, and how that translates into the correspondences via color and roots and planets and all of that. So that folks can then figure out what does it mean then to kind of work with these different kind of modalities of making oils or making waters, right? This cleansing and protection is really real, y'all. So when we talk about spiritual cleansing, spiritual protections, that is both a sacred and mundane act. So in divination study, we kind of go through all those various things. And the goal is that folks will be making their own divination systems as we continue to grow and learn together via the methodology that I'm teaching. Okay. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and do that. Regardless, I'll be back next week. Next Sunday is a full moon in Leo. All right. So remember I talked about all that Leo energy. We're going to start seeing it here with that full moon in Leo, with that opposition to Pluto. We're really going to start getting into the cracking of the performance and getting into the heart of the real self. So this is about your inner child, y'all. It's a lot of inner child work that's going to be being asked of us individually and collectively. So it is time to get curious and play, which means it's time to break the construct of you that keeps you beholden, again, to a structure, system, and God that has told us over and over again, it does not like you. So what does it mean for you then to truly love yourself? All right, y'all. That's all I got. Till next time, keep dreaming, keep exploring. It's through the dreamscapes we can bring the futures that we want to bring into the present. Till next time, I'll see you next Sunday. I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. Like Michelle sang, the cosmos, where we come from. The light that lit the way for our ancestors in the dark of night, when they had to leave the spaces that tried to steal their breath and life. Reworking, while also learning how to work with the land that was also being worked. A land and people under duress. The trees did not ask if they wanted to participate in such brutal practices. Yet here they were. Here we are. All beholden to a power structure that only knows how to take and never to give, while telling us this is the right way to live. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. As Michelle sang, the cosmos. The cosmos. We'll learn to imagine that freedom lied in parable of the sower that sowed the seeds of earth's seed that wanted to bring humans back to the stars, to start again, to start anew. Remember where we come from and who we are. The stars that lit the way, that guide the light. The moon that holds the tides of the waters. Our connection to earth and land. As above, so below. Yet we don't know, because we have lost the above and the below. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free and journey